people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, and now it's time for another installment of the Ring IQ Annual Talent Search. Our next contestant takes us to the land down under, Australia.
Melbourne.
For a young unbeaten up-and-comer that goes by the name Taylah Harrison has returned to the sport after a lengthy hiatus. Before her most recent outing, Taylah Harrison had not boxed since before the pandemic. You heard that right. She hadn't boxed since 2019, but she very recently came back to the sport. It's important to note that Taylah Harris is a multi-sport athlete. She's not just a boxer, she's also a footballer. Natural athlete. It's not uncommon in Australia to see these kinds of crossover athletes, like what we saw in Paul Gallen. Taylah Harris sports a professional record of 8 wins with no losses, 1 draw, 4 knockouts. It's a particularly great time for a boxer, a female boxer, especially in the Australian boxing scene, with boxers like Ebony Bridges and Shernika Johnson. Champions. Up-and-comers like Chanel Dargan and Taylah Harrison. Unbeaten up-and-comers like Sky Nicholson, Beck Hawker. There are way more opportunities now for a female boxer than there ever were. Not just in Australia, in the sport as a whole. Taylah was last in action late last month on the 29th, scored a third-round knockout of Connie Chan. That was her first fight in the sport of boxing, her first fight in approximately 3 years. Close to 4. Before that, the last time she was in action was in November of 2019, before the pandemic hit. Opposite the ring, Janae Harding, who she also stopped. Safe to say that a lot has happened since then. A lot has happened since 2019, pandemic included. The sport of women's boxing saw 2 of the biggest fights that it's ever seen. The Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano fight, the Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall fight. Now, I get the sense that given everything that's happened, Taylah Harris has a renewed interest in the sport and hopes to make a splash of her own, at least domestically. And even though she's been away a while, 3, close to 4 years up until recently, she's very young, so she's got plenty of time to make up for lost time. Only 26 years old, standing in at a very statuesque 5'10", campaigning at or around junior middleweight. Junior middleweight, that's where Natasha Jonas reigns as that division's Unified Ring Magazine and Lineal champion. Terry Harper holds a title there as well. The best way to describe Taylah Harris is as an action fighter. A strong one. Very strong, very fast, very sharp, albeit rough around the edges. There is more work needs doing. I've seen the tape on Taylah Harris, and I have to say, I like what I saw. There's more things needs working on. There's more work needs doing, but she shows promise. Defensively, she is lacking a bit. She can be caught in between the shots, in between the punches, as was evident in the Janae Harding fight of 2019. You know, Janae Harding, she landed some big shots, some meaty punches. In what was a very entertaining fight, she visibly hurt Taylah Harris. But because Taylor's only 26 years old and she's only got 8 pro fights, it's hardly the end of the world that she had to go through some adversity with Janae Harding. I want to say that Taylah Harris's best punches are straight punches from the outside coming in. Her hooks are a little bit wide. She can be caught. And as she steps up in class and climbs up those ranks, she's really going to need to clean that up. In the Femke Hermans versus Mary Spencer fight, we saw that even a fighter of generous physical dimensions, a physically imposing fighter, can be caught coming in if they're not careful. Size and power alone aren't always enough to get the job done. I want to say that Taylah Harris is somewhat of a cross between a Mary Spencer and a Savannah Marshall. Kind of. She's younger than both. She's not as coordinated or fluid or skillful as Savannah Marshall, but there are shades in there, and she does have the punching power, the raw punching power of a Mary Spencer, albeit without Mary's amateur background or pedigree. I like what I see in Taylah Harris. A natural athlete who can help to beef up either the women's welterweight or super welterweight division, otherwise known as junior middle. Those divisions, more than most, need fresh faces, and there are a few floating around. There is Puerto Rico's own amateur standout, Stephanie Pinedo. I really like Stephanie Pinedo, by the way. We've talked about her in a previous installment of the Ring IQ annual talent search. There's Stephanie Pinedo. There's the United Kingdom's own Olympic gold medalist, Lauren Price, who's going to be in action very soon. And there is Australia's own unbeaten up-and-comer, Taylah Harris, who, for that same reason, she needs to tighten it up a bit, because there are a few unbeaten up-and-comers, just like her. They got high ceilings, too. I want to say that for this year, what Taylah really needs to focus on is just being active, just being busy. Don't even worry about world titles or alphabet titles. Just get some rounds in the bank. The woman's only had one fight in the last close to 4 years. It's credible that in the ring with Connie Chan, she didn't look like she lost a step. She didn't look like she missed a beat. Looked like she picked up where she left off.
It's a special young lady.
The goal for this year has to be getting at least 3 to 4 fights in.
Rounds in the bank. That's got to be the first order of business for Taylah.
I anticipate that this could very well be Natasha Jonas's final year in the sport of boxing, and Natasha Jonas holds 3 of the 4 major titles at this weight. If Taylah Harris plays her cards right this year, she may be ready to fight for a title next year.
Look forward to seeing what the future holds for young Taylah Harris.
Men's lightweight news. Unbeaten up-and-comer Frank Martin feels ready for Tank, Stevenson, and Haney right now. Frank Martin is coming off a career-best win over then unbeaten Michelle Rivera. He's trained by famed trainer Derek James, who trains the likes of Errol Spence Jr., who handles Frank Martin's career, Jermel Charlo, Anthony Joshua.
Frank Martin's got the same trainer as those guys.
Martin was in action last December when he dropped and decisioned Michelle Rivera in a battle with the unbeatens. Last month at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Davis returned to the ring and picked up a tremendous win with a 7th-round knockout of unbeaten Ryan Garcia.
Frank Martin aspires to challenge Gervonta Davis and several others in the men's lightweight division. I don't think he's going to have any luck in that department.
Frank Martin doesn't seem to be on Gervonta Davis's radar. A rematch with Isaac Pitbull Cruz, that seems to be what Calvin Ford, Gervonta Davis's longtime trainer, is talking about. So where does that leave Frank Martin, who fights on the PBC side of things?
He's on the same side of the street as Gervonta, the same side of the street as Chris Colbert, Rolly Romero.
Just doesn't seem to be on the eve of any of those fights. Martin was not shocked by Davis' stoppage of Garcia. He expected their contest to end inside the distance. No, I wasn't surprised. I knew somebody was going to get stopped in the fight. I just don't know who it would have been. But I knew that somebody was going to get stopped. I did an interview prior and I said it was going to be a stoppage, Martin told FightHype.com. I thought Tank was going to be the one stopping, but I honestly
felt it could have been either one of them. It was just who landed first with the big shot.
So he's on the same side of the street as Gervonta Davis and Rolly Romero, Chris Colbert, but he doesn't seem to be in line to fight any of those guys.
Nope.
Gervonta looks to be fighting Isaac Cruz for a second time, at least per his longtime trainer he is. Rolly Romero's up there at 140. He's set to fight Ismael Barroso for the newly vacated WBA title.
We're about 5 months into the year of 2023, approximately 5 months since Frank Martin's last fight, and no word in terms of fight news.
Now I can think up of 1 or 2 names that they might offer up to Frank Martin. Maybe they offer him Rayo.
Rayo was in action not that long ago opposite the ring, Chris Colbert. Chris won a controversial points win over Rayo. A lot of people feel Rayo was robbed. I do too.
But after the fight, I heard something about Chris Colbert saying he would return to super featherweight. Chris Colbert, he wasn't a big puncher at super featherweight, and he still isn't at lightweight. That might explain why he means to move back down to 130 pounds. So that takes him out of the running. Maybe they can offer Frank Rayo.
Maybe. Or maybe they can offer him the man that stopped Rayo in just 3 rounds, Edwin De Los Santos.
He hasn't seen action since September of last year when that fight took place, and he doesn't seem to be otherwise preoccupied with anything aside from baseless call-outs for Shakur Stevenson, who's over there on the top-ranked side of things.
By way of social media.
Jose Valenzuela or Edwin De Los Santos seem like realistic opponent options to me for Frank Martin moving forward, though those don't seem to be the names that he has his heart set on. Frank stated, "I'm right here, man. Whoever gives me the opportunity. I'm not ducking nobody. There's no, let's get him ready. I'm ready for them now. If they want to give me the opportunity, I'm going to show them what I can do. I'm ready to show them right now," Martin said. There's a lot of fighters right now that's good at 135. You can't really say who's the best until everybody gets in there with each other. Then you can see who's the best.
Now, Devin Haney, this division's undisputed champion, caught wind of these comments from Frank Martin and stated, "He's old as shit. He should
He
be.
should be ready, is what Devin Haney was trying to imply. You know, Frank Martin, he's one of several unbeaten guys in today's lightweight division that rounds out its talent pool, but he's not in the same age bracket as either Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, or Ryan Garcia.
Those guys are in their mid-20s, whereas Frank is closer to 30.
He's actually the same age as Gervonta Davis. I think it gets lost on a lot of people that Gervonta is older than Ryan, older than Devin, older than Shakur.
Him and Frank Martin are the same age. They're both pushing 30. They're both 28.
So it's safe to say that Gervonta Davis here and now is a lot further in his career than Frank Martin is.
Even though they're the same age.
You know, Frank mentioned Gervonta Davis, he mentioned Devin Haney, he mentioned Shakur Stevenson. He's not about to get a Gervonta Davis fight. He's not about to get a Devin Haney fight either. Devin's set to take on Vasyl Lomachenko, and win or lose, I think he's going to move up to 140 pounds. He's not going to stick around.
Not for Frank Martin.
Maybe for a Gervonta Davis fight, or maybe for a Shakur Stevenson fight, but not a Frank Martin fight.
So Frank's not getting Gervonta, at least not next, and he's not getting Devin Haney either.
That leaves only Shakur Stevenson of the aforementioned fighters that he mentioned, but Shakur's over there on the top-ranked side of things, and respectively, Shakur Stevenson is a bigger name, a more notoriable fighter than Frank Martin. So if push came to shove and the Stevenson people offered Frank a fight, would he cross over to top rank? Because he fights on the PBC.
This again.
Sides of the street, they are important. They do determine what fights are realistic and what fights aren't. If Shakur made this guy an offer to come over and fight him on top rank, would Frank take it?
Oh, I'm sure he'd say yes. I'm sure he would, but what would his handlers say? Because they're the ones that make the decisions, not him.
Bottom line, I'm not expecting to see Frank in there with Devin, Shakur, or Gervonta in the near future. I'd sooner expect him to take on either Edwin De Los Santos or Jose Valenzuela on his own side of things. That's what I think.
Yeah, he's a good fighter, but the political boundary lines in boxing affect him the same way they affect everybody else.
And finally, ahead of this weekend's mega match south of the border, John Ryder trusts the judges in Canelo fight. It will be judged fairly.
It's a bit naive, don't you think?
You think you can win a points decision against the cash cow of boxing in Mexico?
It's a bit naive, don't you think?
North London's Ryder believes he will be given a fair shake by the judges and insists he is capable of winning on points at a packed Estadio Akron and repeat what Dimitri Bivol did in Las Vegas 12 months ago. When asked whether or not he thinks he needs a knockdown to win, Ryder said, no, not at all. In the contract, it's 3 neutral judges, a neutral referee. I think we saw in the Bivol fight. It will be judged fairly on the night.
Yeah, that's provided you beat Canelo Alvarez as decisively as Dimitri did in the event of close rounds.
Who do you think the judges are going to give him to? Who do you think in the event of close rounds is going to get consideration? You or the hometown fighter?
For what is his big homecoming fight?
We've got to trust in the judges to do their job properly. Often, if you go looking for a knockout in a fight, it will never come because you're too desperate to get it. So I'm fully focused on what I do and doing it well and coming away victorious.
Wide-eyed optimism from the London Warrior.
I'm not going to go get greedy and go for a stoppage. You've got to give Canelo the respect he deserves. He's been a great champion for many years. I've gone looking for stoppages in the past and then made a hard night's work of it. I'm going to go with what I do best. Box, be sensible, and listen to the words of the game plan that Tony Sims has set out for me.
While I don't necessarily agree with John's stance when it comes to the judges and the ref, I do agree with what he said about looking for a knockout. You go looking for a knockout, you run the risk of being knocked out.
Or at minimum knocked down. Look at what happened to Teofimo Lopez when he shared the ring with George Kambosos. He came out of his corner like a bat out of hell, guns blazing, looking for an early knockout. And as a result of that, he was the one that got knocked down.
I mean, the good fighters, the year mark of a good fighter is temperance, is a bit of poise.
John is not so big a puncher that he should rely on strength of arms to get the job done and get the job done early. All that's going to do is get him put away early.
If I'm being honest, I think he's going to get put away either way.
God bless him. John added, I don't know if I'll ever fight in front of another crowd as hostile as this, but I think the Mexican fans are all fight fans, so they might boo me on the way in, but as long as we give them what they want in a fight, I'm sure they'll cheer me on the way out. In Liverpool against Callum Smith, there were a few cutthroat gestures and stuff like that. It's to be expected. You're taking on their hometown hero.
John's honesty and what is almost wide-eyed optimism, it is refreshing.
As is the way he navigated his career. If it wasn't for him gambling, if it wasn't for him taking a risk and taking on Zach Parker, not on the Matchroom side of things where he normally fights, but on the Queensbury side of things, if not for that and capitalizing off of that, gambling.
Being willing to take that gamble in hostile territory, because that fight took place in Zach Parker's neck of the woods.
Being willing to gamble is what led him here to the biggest fight of his career. If a crowd is for me, I'm absorbing that. It's spurring me on. But if they're against me, you've got to block it out and be that mentally strong side where you can really spur yourself on.
He is right, though. If you provide the fans with drama in the fight, even if you lose, you still endear yourself to those same fans that might have been booing you on the way in, but might be cheering you on the way out.
If you give him a show. And that's what John Ryder intends to do. John Ryder, he's not really a thinking man's fighter. He's an action guy, albeit a very crafty one. A southpaw.
That makes things interesting.
John Ryder himself says, "This is nothing I haven't experienced before."
He's fought in hostile territory before. He's been the away fighter. When he fought Callum Smith, that was in Liverpool. That was in Callum Smith's neck of the woods.
And more recently, when he fought Zach Parker, that was a Queensbury promotion show, not a matchroom show. So in many ways, he was the away fighter in that fight as well.
It's almost like those fights were a rehearsal for this one.
It was great to participate in that, Ryder told BoxingScene.com. "I grew up watching HBO's 24/7 and Showtime's All Access. I've seen what it was all about, and now I've actually lived it. It was a great experience. It was a little tiring, but quite enjoyable. I got a lot of respect in both cities when I was out there. It was more enjoyable than being on social media and getting disrespected the moment people get behind their keyboard."
And people do that.
Shitty people. The truth is that whether the Boo Birds like it or not, John Ryder has earned his way. He's earned his shot just as much, if not more than, David Benavidez. You say that David is Canelo's mandatory challenger, but so is John.
And it's not like John hasn't fought anybody. He has. He quite controversially lost to Callum Smith. A lot of people think he won that fight. And we know he recently upset the apple cart for Danny Jacobs.
More recently, he upset the apple cart for then unbeaten Zach Parker, who already was WBO's interim champion. And he did it.
He did it in hostile territory because that wasn't a matchroom show.
He did it with no advantages. Getting to Mexico and seeing what it had to offer, seeing the stadium was something. The first time I boxed at a stadium in Hull on the Luke Campbell undercard, it's nothing I haven't experienced before.
Once again, you could argue that a lot of John Ryder's experiences so far have been a rehearsal for this weekend's fight.
That being said, should we expect an upset? A big one. Canelo Alvarez is widely favored to not just beat John Ryder, but stop him.
These aforementioned factors in mind, can we expect John Ryder to upset the apple cart for Canelo the same way Dimitri did? And the answer is no.
And I got nothing but respect for John. I do think he's a world-class fighter. He's rated a top 10 super middleweight across the board, no matter whose divisional rank standings you reference.
He earned his shot.
But styles make fights. And John Ryder's aggressive, mid-range to inside style, his pressure fighting, plays right into Canelo Alvarez's hands. His style, his counterpunching.
I expect this fight is going to have a fan-friendly aesthetic. It's going to be an action fight because John Ryder is an action fighter, and he's going to bring it.
As best as he can. But there's nothing John Ryder does better than Canelo, and there's nothing John Ryder does that Canelo hasn't seen before.
Tack on that it's Canelo's big homecoming fight, that it's been a long time since he fought in front of his hometown audience.
He's going to want to put on a show.